welcome once again to Mondays with Marty. My name's Cassie. This is my dog Marty. And today we're actually going to follow up on our Mondays with Marty from 2 sessions ago where I was talking about what I feed Marty. And we're going to talk about what I look for when I look at a dog food. I'll have Marty on his boundary most of the time, but you'll see I'll release him now and again because he is a little high energy right now. So expecting him to stay on here for the entire video is asking a little much for him. But anyway, going right into it. So I have here an ingredient panel. So the first thing I like to look for, is ingredients. This is actually the ingredient list, most of the ingredient list from Adult Gold. I am a big From fan. I love their diets. I've fed almost all of them. I really like their ingredients, and my dogs have done well on them. And my picky eater really likes all of their kibble. So that's a big seller for me, and the dogs look really nice on it. So going back to the diet, the first thing that I like to look for whenever I look at an ingredient panel is the first 2 ingredients. I want them to be some sort of meat protein. In this instance, it's chicken and chicken meal. And I actually have some markers so I can highlight it for you. So we have chicken and chicken meal. And then chicken bone broth, but we'll talk about that in a second. I like to see this because protein is one of the most important nutrients for your dog because they are obligate carnivores, which means they need meat in their diet, but they don't have to eat, or not obligate carnivores. I can't remember the name. Sorry, they are omnivores. Obligate carnivores are cats. They have to have meat, whereas dogs are omnivores, so they can have, they need a variety of different types of nutrients in their diets, but they do need a lot of protein. So having an animal protein as the first 2 ingredients is important from that regard, and I like animal proteins because your dog is an animal. So not all proteins are the same. An animal protein is most closely matching the type of protein that your dog needs because different proteins are made up of different molecules. The molecules that make up of proteins are amino acids, and your dog has a certain requirement for the types of molecules within the proteins that he or she needs. So I like to have meat meal, or a meat protein, including a meat meal as the first 2 ingredients because I know that they're going to be a digestible ingredient that is meeting most of my dog's needs. As far as a raw protein versus a meat meal, I like both. The way that ingredients are listed is by weight of them being added into the diet, but it's prior to the kibble being processed. So raw meat has a lot of water in it, which means it's really heavy because water is heavy. So when it's added into the diet, it's raw meat. And when it comes out into the kibble, that's been dried down. So all that moisture is pulled out of that meat, which means once the moisture is pulled out of this ingredient, it moves further down the list, meaning the meat meal is your primary source of protein in this diet. Because meat meal, on the other hand, is ground and dried prior to it being added into the diet. Prior to it going into the diet, which means even after that kibble is dried down into kibble form, it still retains the same concentration of protein. So in this diet, this is where most of your protein is coming from. I also like to look for additional sources of protein because, again, different types of proteins have different makeups. So the amino acids or the molecules in chicken and chicken meal are different than what's in a fish meal, such as this Menhaden fish meal. And then this also has duck in it, it has lamb in it. This isn't a requirement. I'll feed diets that don't have multiple sources of protein, but I like to have multiple sources just because, again, you're providing more nutrients to potentially meet all of your dog's requirements. Next, I like to look for the different types of fat. So in this diet, there is chicken fat, and there's salmon oil, and you also have some flaxseed. With these diets, I have found that the fat content of them and the type of fat is really beneficial for the dog's skin and coat health. That's probably the best indicator of the quality of diet you're feeding. So, stand. Good. His coat is really thick and fluffy. It's really soft. You can't feel it, but it's also super shiny. And that's pretty indicative of diet that he's being fed. One, he's healthy, and that helps. But a dog with lower quality fats in the diet is going to have drier skin. The coat won't be as shiny. It won't be as soft. That's a great indicator of just how the quality of your diet. And similar to proteins, fats also have, there's not one kind of fat. There's different fat molecules in each source of fat in this diet. So again, you're just providing more of what your dog needs by having a variety in here. And then I also like to see some different types of grains. I'm a big proponent of grains. I've always liked them. The dogs can handle them. There's nothing wrong with grain-free diets, but I personally prefer having some grains in my diets. And I like seeing some sources of fiber because fiber is good for gut health, and it keeps their stools more normal. And too much fiber is a bad thing. Too little fiber is a bad thing. Just you want to look for a sweet spot of fiber. And then, of course, all diets are generally going to include some sort of vitamin and mineral, and more and more complete diets are also including some synthetic amino acids. So as I mentioned, proteins are made up of amino acids. Some manufacturers, through their own research, have determined that dogs might need some additional amino acids separate from just what's in these proteins. So they'll include them in a diet in a synthetic form. So it's just a manufactured form. It's still super digestible and it's fine for your dog. One example that has been discussed lately is taurine. So taurine has gotten a lot of attention lately in both dogs, and it's been added in cat diets for quite some time now. So that's the ingredient panel. With the ingredient panel, I like to look at the guaranteed analysis, which will list crude protein, crude fat, crude fiber, and moisture. This essentially gives you an overview of the nutrient levels in the diet. However, it doesn't talk about how digestible the nutrients are, which means your dog may or may not be able to use them. That's where it's important to look at both the guaranteed analysis and the ingredients. Because if you have a crude protein that's 25% crude protein, and it's all a plant-based protein, there's a strong possibility that those protein molecules, or a portion of them, will be bound up in fiber that your dog can't digest or use. So knowing that this is 25% crude protein with a lot of high quality meat proteins, I know that most of this protein is going to be available for my dog for digestion. Again, I like to see some fats, and I do like to see some fiber in my dog's diets, just because of it's good for their gut health and it's good for stool consistency. But again, you don't want to go too high or things will be unpleasant for both you and your dog. And then you'll see moisture. So this is a kibble diet. The big difference between a wet food or a frozen raw diet and kibble is the moisture content. There are some other differences, but it's really hard to take a can of dog food and compare it to kibble because the moisture in the canned dog food deletes these nutrients. So you do have to do a little bit of converting to figure out, okay, what are the similarities here? Just some food for thought. And the last thing I like to look at are the calorie content. When I'm comparing across diets, I like to look at the kcals per kilogram. This is because kcals per cup, a cup is a volume measurement. So if you have a itty bitty kibble and a large kibble and you're trying to compare the two, they're not going to be the same, because you can fit a lot more of those itty bitty kibbles in a cup than you can a large kibble. I actually, while I was preparing for this, I'm feeding my dogs the From 4-star salmon tunolini, which has really tiny kibble pieces, and I'm also using a Merrick full source for training treats. And those kibble sizes are like triple what the From is. So I weighed them both just to see, what are the differences. And the cup of from Salmon Tunolini was 109 grams, and the Merrick Full Source was 116 grams. So not a huge difference, but you can't entirely compare apples to apples when looking at kcals per cup. So I do like to look at kcals per kilo. And then you can calculate your dog's calorie requirements online. Actually, there's a couple good websites with the formula that you can plug in, and then you can use that to calculate the number of cups your dog needs in a day based on the kcals per cup. So that's a brief overview, of what I think about and look at when I'm looking for a diet. And just to give you an example of a poor quality diet, I'm not going to tell you what diet this is because I don't want to badmouth any brands, but this is an example of a poor quality diet. Ground yellow corn is the first ingredient. That's a lot of carbohydrate. Your dog can handle grains, but you really want a good animal protein as the first two ingredients. Meat and bone meal. It is a high quality source of protein, but as I mentioned, not all proteins are the same. So by labeling it meat and bone meal, the manufacturer can essentially use any meat and bone meal they want. It can be lamb, it can be beef, it can be a combination. So there is the potential that the consistency from lot to lot or bag to bag will not be the same because not all proteins are the same. This is especially applicable for any of you that have a dog with a meat allergy. You don't know if they're allergic to lamb. You don't know if there's lamb in this diet. So I do prefer seeing the type of protein being added in the diet. And then soybean meal is the second source of protein. Again, it's less available to your dog because it is, there's just a certain amount of percentage of protein in that diet that they can't break down as well. But additionally, the molecules within the soybean meal proteins are not exactly what your dog needs. They'll be able to use some of them, but I prefer an option that's a lot closer to what they need. And then, of course, vitamins and minerals. And then as far as the nutrition panel goes, 21% protein, not ideal. I'd prefer to see more than that, but it's not the end of the world. But this is the big one. So the diet we had looked at before, I believe, was 16% fat. This is 9% fat. So it still meets your dog's requirements for fat, but most likely a dog eating this diet will have a duller coat. They may get dry skin in the winter. It won't be as shiny or as soft. It's just, it's good for them to have a little more fat in their diet than this. But additionally, if everything else, so the percentages that are not accounted for here, that's all carbohydrate. And your dog can only handle so much carbohydrate before it comes out the other end. So while there are plenty of dogs that are going to do great on this diet, there's a lot that's going to end up in your yard. So ultimately, you have to feed more of this diet than you do the From Adult Gold that we were looking at because it's just not as usable for your dog, so it's not as digestible. So thanks for sticking it with me on that. I know I probably got a little long-winded, but those are some of the things that I think about when I look for dog food for my dogs. I would never feed my dogs this diet, but there are plenty that would benefit or that would perform just fine on it. So it really is whatever works best for your dog, but I'm a big advocate for feeding high-quality diets. So anyway, we'll wrap up. If you have any questions, feel free to drop them in the comments per usual. And I hope everybody has a great holiday, and we'll see you in 2 weeks.